Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. The third anniversary to the standoff in Ladakh is coming up. Of course, many will call it the India-China standoff. What is the status of the standoff right now? Both the countries seem to be in sort of a stalemate, if I may say so, right at the beginning of the conversation. But we need to understand where do we stand tactically on the borders as where the fight is. We saw last year in November, December region where the Chinese tried to come inside Yangtze and got a little bit of a treatment where they would have obviously gone back and reported. What is going to happen this year? Are they going to come back during the summers? Where are they going to come back, and how is India going to handle the long, arduous LAC? For that, I have with me Major General Ashok Kumar. Sir, thank you so much for joining me for the first time on Dev Talks. Welcome to the show, and looking forward for having many more such wonderful conversations with you in the future.
Thank you, Adi. Thank you very much. So kind of you.
So let's open up by just tell us what's happening on the LAC right now. There's a lot of news about rebalancing which is being done by both the forces. That is something which is I guess a periodic sort of an affair. The Chinese have opened up a lot more in terms of their aerial infrastructure. They've built up some helipads and this and that and the other. Certain supply stations have come into place in the rear there. What is actually happening on the LOC, and how are things looking at as we speak today, sir?
Adi, if you critically see the Chinese activities post 1962 till this large-scale transgressions happened in Eastern Ladakh in 2020, whose third anniversary has almost reached. Since we do not relate to a date, 15th April, 20th April, and all that. So, the date-wise anniversary cannot be stated correctly. But we talk of, April, May, 2020 time frame. So, third anniversary is already there. Between these two timelines, there have been skirmishes, transgressions, and number of, activities by China over a period of time, responded by us also in some manner. And but what has happened in 2020 and thereafter, it is a new phenomena altogether, and this phenomena is not going to really go off, because except what has been happening on the line of actual control, there is a large number of follow-up actions which is being taken by China initially. I must tell you, if you see the development of force levels and the deployment on the line of actual control from both the sides, while we have been focusing on holding certain important passes where we have had access of reaching, and focusing more on the tactical deployment. On the other hand, if you really see the Chinese deployment, except in Nathula or somewhere else, I'm not telling about the situation now, because now they have also come in the tactical deployment at number of locations. Their forward deployments, the dig downing of defenses, everything was missing. So initially, China focused on the strategic and operational level preparations, wherein in terms of force structures, in terms of the long range weapons, in terms of the airfields, the naval growth, all kind of activities was being done, and he was silent on the in the tactical domain. Now, having finished that and got ahead of us, miles. In fact, it is competing USA in number of fields. Even in case of the hypersonic weapon system, it has even crossed USA also. So, having progressed that much, now it has focused in the tactical domain close to the line of actual control. Now you can say the deployments coming up by themselves, also in form of the modern villages in terms of dual infrastructure. The deployment currently which is going on between India and China is not only limited to the deployment on the line of actual control alone. It is followed up in the depth also on both the sides. In addition to all this, he is also trying to enhance the conflict threshold with India. The issue of Arunachal Pradesh, he's raking up multiple ways. If you watch it carefully, this is the third time wherein he renamed 11 places in Arunachal Pradesh. This is the second after April 20 transgressions, and the overall third time. Besides, he has been objecting to visit of Prime Minister, Raksha Mantri, in fact, all cabinet ministers visiting Arunachal Pradesh, and number of other activities in multiple domains. He has also tried to put the person who was in Galwan clash and injured, as a mascot in the Beijing Olympics, and number of things which he has done and doing. With every passing day, the intensity of conflict escalation is increasing. So today, more as against making the conjecture as to how it is likely to unfold, because you can predict certain things, and but certain things will depend on the how the geopolitical scene emerges elsewhere. Like nobody could imagine that Russia Ukraine war will turn out in this manner, and there are number of other factors. You never know, tomorrow the Taiwan issue comes up between USA and the China in a big way, and the different contour of the war fighting takes place. But leaving that aside, my core argument today in discussing with you will be as to what we should do to ensure that we do not lose any further ground on the line of actual control. And you will agree with me, of course, after this transgression in Ladakh was reported, Galwan clash happened, and thereafter, because of the media activity and other things, the common man in India is now more aware about the northern borders with China. However, otherwise we were primarily focused, on Pakistan. So I will take a quick look at Pakistan so that we can correlate, and in that core argument, what we should do. I will not try to list out large number of activities. I will just say only one thing, that there is an urgent and inescapable need of holding the line of actual control physically. So now I will take you to the Pakistan border as to what we have faced when we have not done this, and similarly what we have faced when we have not done this on the Chinese border. And I will also try to give you some examples both from Pakistan and Chinese borders as to when we have held the borders physically, or the line of actual control, or line of control physically, how it has turned in our favor. Irrespective of the government and bureaucracy in power, I think there is a connect which is continuing in a similar manner and has not changed much even as on today, and we have to take a serious look at that. Now, going back to Pakistan. Now, when we became independent on 15th August 1947, that time the border between India and Pakistan line was not drawn. Actually, the Radcliffe line, which becomes the dividing line between India and Pakistan, came on 17th August 1947, 2 days after the partition. In any case, on that day, Jammu and Kashmir was neither with Pakistan nor with India. So that issue of the so-called border conflict was not that prevalent with Pakistan. Thereafter, you know, uh, in October 47, when Maharaja Hari Singh signed the instrument of accession and Jammu and Kashmir became part of India, we intervened in Jammu and Kashmir but remained focused predominantly on Pakistan, not realizing that the moment entire Jammu and Kashmir came to India, the current excitation which we claim also came to us along with that. We can still understand that there were lot many challenges at that point of time. The country had become independent. There were more than 500 princely states to be reunited, and a number of other challenges. And more so, we were fighting an active war with Pakistan to address the issue in Jammu and Kashmir. But Jammu and Kashmir war also got over on 5th January 1949. I know, of course, and a ceasefire line was drawn, and two-third remained with us. One-third went to, as a Pakistani occupied Kashmir. But even on that date, from 9th January 1949, if you see the current the China, it came in existence on 1st October 1949. So between 5th January 49 and 1st October 49, we were not fighting a war also, which could have been taken an LB of not doing something. We had a Tibetan government in full control and power. We had an entire JNK legally, acceded to India, and we could have gone in an agreement with Tibet between that time to go to our borders, delineate that, but we did not do. I'm sure there would have been reasons to that. But not only that, on becoming independent, even China did not occupy Tibet immediately. It occupied Tibet only in 1951, of course, by force, a major share, but fair amount of area was still not its in physical control. But from that time till 1951, before Chinese occupied, we did not put any physical marker and presence in the areas which we claim ours. It is true, the area was difficult, it still remains difficult, but you can, change the grade and nature of occupation, but you cannot divide it, without occupying. There are, multiple 70 markers which reflect a country's, position in a particular area. The physical occupation being the one and the most important one. Anyway, I will not cover the history of China, so to say, but when 1962 happened, which were areas we were claiming by publishing our map in 1954, or thereafter in 1957, by getting to know as to how the road has been built by China through Siachen up to the Karakoram Pass. But the areas which we claimed and which we were trying to contest with China, we were not holding. Even there were areas where there were not much of dispute. Even that we were not physically holding. 62 happened. Entire excitation remains with China since then, and of course some areas of Arunachal Pradesh also remains with him. Though China propagates that it went for unilateral withdrawal after 1962 war, but if you see its position before the war, which was in September 62, and where it returned, it still had occupied a fair amount of areas at multiple locations in Ladakh, in Himachal Pradesh, in Uttarakhand, and in Arunachal Pradesh. Predominantly in Arunachal and eastern Ladakh, and lesser in these areas because these were these did not see much of the conflict during 1962, Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. So at that time, Sikkim was a protectorate of India. It was a protectorate of British, and that agreement was re-signed by India in 1950 with Sikkim. Sikkim became a protectorate of India, and we were responsible for its defense. And for its defense, we had deployed troops physically in Nathula and Chola, which were the border points of Tibet or China, whatever we wish to call it now. And when they attempted to transgress and challenges, I'm sure the 1967 event can be read well and good. General Sagat Singh was in charge of affairs, and we gave a good beating to Chinese, and large number of casualties were suffered by China, and within 2 to 3 days they never dreamt of doing anything again in that particular area. But why it happened? Because we had a physical presence there. Okay. Now come back to Pakistan again. Now Pakistan, we got in whatever manner freed from 1947-48 war, and the CFL came in Jammu and Kashmir. But still, even on Pakistan border, we were not holding CFL all along. We were not holding the areas of run of Kutch also in strength. Our majority of the areas were blank, and predominantly the argument being the difficult areas and untenable areas and things like that. So 1962, 1965 happened on Pakistan side. Why 1965 happened? Where did it start? It initially started in run of Kutch itself, and subsequently after 2 to 3 months thereafter, it happened in Jammu and Kashmir, where again it was the means of infiltration, because the borders or the line of control, so to say, was not held physically. Naturally, in those days, we didn't have that kind of surveillance means also, that if you're not holding the line of control or borders physically, you can have much look into the enemy areas and activities. So 65 was also somewhat a surprise to India. We fought, we won something, we lost something, and finally in 1966 Tashkent Agreement, it became back to square one. And whatever we had got, we returned, and whatever Pakistan had got, Pakistan returned. And the CFL, what was at the termination of 1947-48 war, was also restored in 1965 after 65 also. 71 Pakistan I leave aside, because that was a different ball game altogether, because it was operation of West Pakistan and East Pakistan, it's rising India's support and creation of Bangladesh, that is a separate issue altogether. But as we go ahead, we come to 1984. Now, 1984, we realized, the advantage of physically holding a feature for its occupation. We occupied Siachen Glacier. There is no area either on the Pakistan border or line of control, or anywhere on the AGPL or the line of actual control on the Chinese border as difficult as is Siachen. When we occupied Siachen, it was not only the terrain and altitude difficulty, it was also facing an active enemy. They were firing and a lot of deaths taking place, and there were a lot of challenges. But we still held on, and the Siachen glacier is with us today because of our physically holding that area. When you are having the borders in a friendly nation, then the method in which you hold your borders may be a different thing altogether. But once you have the adversarial relations like this, with Pakistan and China, you have to have a different standard of border holding. So we learned a lesson from 84. We did well in Siachen Glacier, but we forgot its lesson as we traveled down from NJ 9842 and further down south and come to the Turtuk and Essen and the Kargil sector. So what happened in 1999? There were large unheld gaps on both sides. I was having the privilege of getting posted as brigade major of Kargil brigade during off visit, and Pakistan utilized those unheld gaps to create adverse conditions for India. While we say and we believe that we have done very well, but if we do the objective assessment, it will be worthwhile to examine that we finally got our own area back. We suffered more than 500 soldiers killed, much higher than what Pakistan had suffered, and things like that. So we will leave that as to why Kargil happened, what was the objective, and this thing. I am just trying to point out, if there is an unheld area in a larger measure, it will create problem. It has happened on Pakistan. It has happened in our favor in 1967 in Sikkim and in 1984 in Apmitur. But rather than learning that lesson, even thereafter, with China, we have held some areas, but after 1984 also, we did not hold the entire length of line of actual control. So what did happen? China did Samdurangchu in 1987 in Tawang sector. Namkachu, and then thereafter the Nyamjangchu comes from north to south in India. Then is the Samdurangchu. These are the a line north of which is China is physically holding the features, and the southern side is our features. But it crossed, occupied a vacated camp of India, Wangdung, held that position. India also mobilized in large scale, and all the forward positions have been held. Of course, China has not gone back from Wangdong. It continues today also there. But because of our mobilization and forward movement, at least in that area, we are largely close to LAC, physically present in lesser numbers in non-campaigning season and larger numbers in the campaigning season. In other areas also, we are trying to increase our presence. But I think there is a mindset that there has to be better road connectivity and infrastructure, only then that area should be held. The deployment has got actually two formats. One is that the infrastructure leads and then the deployment follows. Second is the deployment leads, that is, you do the deployment first, sustain them by whether by air, 80 or foot marches or whatever be the measures, and finally infrastructure is forced to develop to take care of the need of the troops deployed. The areas which are critically, they require to be looked from the second model. uh, Initially, if the relationship would have been friendly with China or not so bad, and its expansionist agenda would not have been known to us and to the entire world, we could have followed the first model, which we are largely doing. But what happened in April 2020, I think it is a dark reminder that we must shift to the second model. Because while we have now, deployed number of locations in Eastern Ladakh on the LAC or the close to LAC, but there are a number of other areas in Arunachal Pradesh, in Uttarakhand, in Himachal Pradesh, where we are still to get deployed on the line of actual control. So, if we want to safeguard our territory from any Chinese aggressive actions, we have to physically deploy there. An entire area of Chinese border is much lesser in degree of difficulty as to what we are facing in Siachen glacier. And as of now, at least tomorrow it may, turn out different. That is a separate issue. But as of now, there are no, firings taking place. That once you have physically deployed there, then you have to also take care of the, action by enemy, and that kind of thing is not there as of now. So we must, take advantage of this situation. But when you advocate this logic, the only question people say, where will you find so much of troops? Even in Kargil, once we tried to take care of the unheld gaps post Kargil operations, the area which was held just by a brigade, that is now being held by a division sized force. So, whenever you are trying to hold the troops physically, it will consume troops, and more so in mountains. So, the main question comes that, where will you find these kind of troops to hold the entire borders physically? And of course this is going to be the cost related factor also. So there are also the, practical measures today available. We have large number of, ITBP battalions which are having the responsibility of border guarding with China as part of the one force one border. And you would have also read in the newspaper, and a lot of articles came that, sometime back about 7 to 9 new ITP battalions have also been raised, and more are being raised over a period of time. So, as against, we should take the situation with China as if this is a lull period between two conflicts. It should not be taken as a peace and tranquility period, and that we prepare, and some, other day in future, some war will take place. It is a lull period, and lull period only that side does well, which utilizes that time to prepare its forces and resources for the future conflict. So, if we have to take this period as lull, we have to also make that kind of preparations. We are not sure as to how much long this lull will become, whether it will actually terminate in a war or not. Actually, war is not a good option for any country for that matter. But the ITBP and army as being thought as a tiered option. Normally, in a conventional border guarding role, you have a border guarding force which takes care of the border in the peacetime, and then thereafter, army is there in the depth are, kept as reserve, so that once the battle indicators start for the conflict, and then army is mobilized and, moves forward, and those border guarding troops also come under control of the, army. But this model, the conventional way of doing things is, of a World War II vintage. It is not relevant in the conflict escalation matrix between India and China. So, a border guarding force of ITBP and army must be taken as part of the same basket. And when I say that, while we have made certain efforts to enhance the interoperability between these two forces, there is a time that, as against only getting limited to the interoperability and the border guarding troops handing over their responsibility to the army, they have to have the overlapping profile. The name may be different, but they're equipping, their pattern, their training, their standards, everything has to be par with army, so that they also contribute substantially, not only the guarding the border qualitatively, handle these small skirmishes, but also be part of the war fighting effectively. Of course, today the nation has the capability that it can fast track the infrastructure in a big way. Border roads is doing an exceptional job in border infrastructure creation. It still has the substantial capacity to do more if the more funds are given. I had the opportunity of hearing Mr. Nitin Gadkari, who is respected, by everybody all across the political setups, and he explained the method as to how he generates funds for NHI, and he declared that there are no dearth of funds really required. Only the requirement is of that we have to dream big and we have to deliver big, and which he is doing, I think, in an exceptional manner. I think the government has to support border road organization also to give it more funds, and I'm sure with the capacity and the current orientation, even the border infrastructure to reach on all the passes, not only in Ladakh but also in Arunachal Pradesh, all that can be done in an early time frame, very early time frame. Of course, the effort being done in Arunachal Pradesh for creating axials and laterals, 2 tiers of laterals, all that is good, but we don't have time to our side. In case we delay these things too much, then it will be counterproductive. Then another issue comes that once you are pumping so much of money only for defense purpose, it may be at the cost of development. So I think there are better models for that also. If just to look at China, your primary adversary at the moment, his entire infrastructure is dual use. Even the model villages which he is creating close to the LAC, there the villages are there which are taking care of habitation and development. Everything is happening which should happen with the civil population. But then there are defenses also, storage also for ammunition also, the weapon pits also, which can be used by the army also, and some semblance of the surveillance and other means are also being done. So we have to also look at the dual use infrastructure so that the investment is also economically viable. We have to change the land use model in these hill states. If you really see Jammu and Kashmir, the issue of 35A was there. It has got resolved after abrogation of Article 370. But all other hill states also, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, every hill state does not allow rest of the Indians to come and buy land, as per their will, that they pay the cost and they pay the stamp duty and get the land registered. Whereas they themselves have no such restriction in rest of the country. At least now the government has moved bill wherein forest clearance and other issues around 100 kilometers from the LAC or IB or the line of control, and all these things are going to be given because of the defense requirements. I think there is similar requirement that 100 kilometers there should not be any restriction wherein land can be used by anybody. These places one has been, it is beautiful and out of the world places. These can be open to the tourism, to the adventures. There is endless opportunities, and I think all organs of government have to think out of box, because till the time we focus on the process and not on the product, we may still progress, but the pace of progress will be much slower, and we don't have that kind of time. So basically, my argument in the current stand of extrapolation is that we must hold the entire line of actual control if we want to checkmate China to do any further transgression either in the Eastern Ladakh or anywhere where we are having the line of actual control. Of course, the diplomatic, political, all kind of effort should be made in case we can delineate and mutually accept the line of actual control, because the border, settlement has got major issues. But LAC is not having that kind of challenge. I'm sure if the statesmanship from both the sides, interface, at least the line of actual control can be delineated. Once that is delineated, then we can have a different model. But with China being totally unpredictable, we cannot take chances. So that is all I had to say. If you have anything you wish to highlight or say me to throw a light any particular facet, I'll be more than happy to do that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely interesting, sir. Sorry, the factor that is, I mean, the if I may, for the lack of a better word, chal and kapat that was used with us in 1962 was also a big chal from our own self to our own self, because we never went to the places that we were supposed to command. I think the last patrol that went to the Ladakh, and I forget the name of the place. It's halfway through to exciting lake, starting with H. I'm not very sure of the name. But we went there last in 1957, 58, sort of a region, and 62 we lost that entire place. So the argument is absolutely valid, sir, and there's no question about it. You've also answered a question with regards to where will we get the forces from, and that is of course one of the biggest questions that everybody is going to ask. But sir, I have a little bit of a different question. How will ISR augment high levels of ISR as what we are seeing in the Russia-Ukraine war? That has actually augmented the military effort to a large extent with regards to quick reconnaissance and quick reaction. How would that augment the effort that you're trying to actually tell us to do on the borders? Because not every post, I'm not sure because I've not been to the terrain, but when one looks at a map, it seems very difficult to actually occupy the entire line. So, is there a possibility of augmenting the holding with ISR and other related technologies?
Absolutely. In fact, I must thank you when I had thought of speaking to you, and I was to educate the physical holding and the challenges despite ITBP being co-opted. I was also planning to cover how the qualitative ISR with modern technological tools can help reduce the pressure of in any case we don't have to the hand holding and do the border guarding in that manner. In any case we have to hold the physical features, but the ISR is very important and critical. And the best part are this: today we had the capability to put the fiber optic cable all along the line of actual control, mount our surveillance devices using different kind of technologies, so that where one feels the other catches, whether it is optical sensor based, IR sensor based, the radar information based, whether it is the piezoelectric waves. So the multiple kind of sensors which are being tried out actually to check the terrorists crossing the line of actual control. There are certain sensors are getting deployed along with the fence, that kind of some model is existing, is on ground. Many UAVs are also being tried out, and they are also doing the job. But today the nation has already got the capability with the defense forces and with the public sector undertakings. The basil is one such organization under Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, mini Navratna. They are into a lot of job being done, and there are large number of private sector industries which are working in drones and otherwise on the sensor based capacities. So I think the qualitative ISR is something which is in any case required, whether you physically hold or don't hold. And once you do that in unison, then your physical deployment of tools will reduce, it will be better managed. Only thing what is required, that whenever we have been taught that once where you lay the minefield, and enemy is trying to cross that, and so that minefield area has to be kept under observation, that whenever that detection takes place, we should be able to respond. So the firstly the ISR capability needs to be developed along the entire frontal tier. In the depth of tier, it has to be taken to the from the air and the space also, so that the long term deployment plans, they can also be dovetailed, and a cohesive picture can be possible. And along with that, we have the physical positioning has to depend in a manner, so that if there is any detection of any enemy intrusion taking place, you can immediately respond. I will remind you, in fact, when 1962, China happened and India got worried about these things, and then subsequently China study group was created specifically to take the decisions related to China. So in 1976 they came out with the 65 patrolling points starting from Karakoram Pass down to Chuman. These were identified on ground, but they were also mandated to be patrolled. Otherwise, if you really honestly see, even a person who is unaware about the military functioning, can you dream the kind of transgressions which have come to the fore? They would have happened in one night, two night, three nights, four nights. They would have taken substantial amount of time for Chinese to move, do the transgression, create the infrastructure, and come to the farm the way they finally got detected. So all that takes time. In case we can have something like an effective ISR combined with the reactionary force. The reaction need not be only by the physical troops. You can have airborne troops, you can have the missile attacks, you may be doing anything. Till the time when we talk of the manning physically manning, as I explained, does not mean the hand holding all along. It means you are holding the tactically important features, but you have an effective ISR combined with the reaction response capability. If you can do that, then your requirement of tools will reduce substantially, and with lesser number of tools, with ITBP also being co-opted with certain other actions, these things will be possible in much better manner.
Indeed, sir, that's something which is very interesting because what you've brought about is a very very interesting combination of both the things. You've said that ISR, of course, being important, there is also a combination of a quick reaction force which would be needed to kind of take that entire situation forward. So finally, just a 30-second thought on basically the factor that you've got a long border, and these particular border areas, of course, the cartographic warfare which actually goes on from the Chinese end is something very interesting. I find it to be very, very interesting because when you read the book of Sun Yat-sen, he does not talk about, who mentions the international development of China, and he talks about various different regions, including Tibet. Uh, he does not talk about Ladakh, he does not talk about any of those regions, uh, which is interesting to me because that tells you that the Chinese did not have those regions within their plans at the time when this book was written. How does Indian Army and the Indian Armed Forces actually deal with this cartographic warfare that actually happens? Do we actually have a set of maps that we claim with our settings and stuff like that? How does this game work, sir?
See, I will highlight two facets. One is that China has migrated on its concept of borders. Initially, it had concept of the physical borders, and immediately after it came to power in form of PRC, it tried to then capture anything which was part of ROC. It then went back to King Dynasty, wherever it was having the largest empire and reach. That is where it raised that it belongs to us. Wherever the agreements and the legal documents existed and it were adversarial to China, it argued that they have signed it under adverse condition and they were weak and things like that. That is the way. But thereafter, another thing which he did once he came to South China Sea and East China Sea, normally in the points and physical delineation takes place only on the land borders. But there he talked up the nine dash line and things like that, to create the new borders on the maritime boundaries also. And thereafter in the third stage it has now talked of the interest borders, that wherever the China's interest lies, that is where it borders are there. Otherwise, even in the LAC transgressions, if you see especially on Pangongsu Lake, we have number of areas on LAC of differing perceptions. But and we know that what China is saying and he knows that what we are saying, we are not agreeing, that is separate issue. But even that its stance has been changed. So China is something unbelievable. He is doing these kind of things to articulate. And it is actually initially when post World War, USA and Soviet Union emerged, and subsequently USA and Russia became power, and that time China talked of the multipolar world. But slowly and steadily, it has not only tried to replace Russia to become one of the two superpowers, it is trying to replace USA as a sole superpower of the world. There are a number of failings because of it, debt trap diplomacy, and number of other issues because of the multiple other regions. But that is where China is looking at, and therefore India has to be focused. You read any document, even in 2013, when Xi Jinping came to power, their think tank based article was published, where then they gave as to in next 50 years what they wish to do in different timelines. When do they want to integrate Taiwan? When they want to handle India? And they had their own priorities. Russia was the last one, six, because they also have an issue with Russia, with whom they have now propagating the no limit friendship. They did
The famous
that
six
also
wars,
with India also in 1954, after Panchshir was signed and Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai happened.
the famous six
But
wars of China.
China does not belong to anybody. It thinks 50 to 100 years hence. That is a thought which we have to imbibe in as part of our culture, our the national culture, which has to be independent of the parties in power, independent of those things are separate. The politicians have their own vision, own compulsions. Some good people come, some not so good people will come. Those things will keep happening. But for nation building, the entire national mind landscape has to be very futuristic, which can look into 50 to 100 years hence. Because the creation of infrastructure, creation of force power, creation of the war fighting, everything takes time. And we cannot create these things once the war is knocking on our doors. So we have to emulate certain good things of long term vision from China. It is already happening in some way in our scheme of things. Also, we have also started talking of 10 years, 20 years, 25 years, 50 years, and those kind of things have started finding at least a little bit space in the Indian security establishment and the national establishment also. But more needs to be done. And I'm sure till the time you keep inciting people with your YouTube, I'm sure the national landscape will change.
So thank you so much for those kind words. Sir, thank you. This has been a fantastic first discussion. I'm sure that we will have many more. Let me just say this, that we have actually had a very grounded discussion with regards to making people understand the realities of the border, and I appreciate that. To all the viewers, please like and subscribe this video. Please do let us know what you think about the discussion and any questions that you've had, so that we could follow up with the general in the next conversation. Sir, to you, thank you so much once again. And till next time, Jai Hind.
Thank you, Jai Hind.